Welcome to Nocturne Historia. The torch flickers against stone. You stand in a marble hall beneath stars painted in lapis and crushed gold, an echo of a sky that no longer remembers its gods. The lion's pelt above once belonged to a conqueror, but the breath in these walls is not his. It is hers. Cleopatra. Born in the cradle of empires, she will not inherit peace, but possibility. The wind moves like fingers across ancient papyrus, as if history is still being written. Below the painted dome, the silence trembles. A girl stirs in silk, and destiny holds its breath. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. The air inside the palace is thick with incense, sweet resin, lotus oil, a trace of ash. Night falls slowly in Alexandria, as if the sun itself lingers to watch her sleep. Down stone corridors polished by centuries of ambition, you drift until you find her, a newborn queen, eyes not yet trained to the world, but already filled with its memory. Cleopatra 7, Thea Philopator, daughter of kings, heir to broken altars and burning scrolls. She lies wrapped in linen dyed the color of river light. Beside her crib, a carved ibis watches with onyx eyes, and overhead, stars shimmer not in the sky, but painted on ceilings, because for her, the sky must come indoors. Her mother hums a lullaby in fading Greek, the words older than the empire itself. The melody dances with shadows and settles into the pores of the stone walls. A nurse offers milk warmed with saffron. Outside, the Nile hums a deeper song, one that bends around tombs and temples, around secrets only water remembers. Cleopatra's world is not gentle, even now. Her father, Ptolemy XII, wears his crown like a mask, propped up by Roman coin and trembling loyalty. The court is already a den of whispers. The child will not have time to be a child. Even now, something in her stillness says she knows. You drift toward the window. Below, Alexandria glows, lanterns in domes and towers, minarets from far lands, and the harbor where ships rock gently as if cradled in a dream. Farther still, a pale shadow rises, the great library, its silhouette flickering with candlelight and secrets, and near it, entombed in crystal silence, lies the body of Alexander the Great. The city bears his name, but it will remember hers. The silence is heavier now. The walls of her nursery are inscribed with subtle symbols, serpents coiled around papyrus stalks, falcons flying toward twin suns. Some are protective, some prophetic. None are passive. A black cat sits curled by the threshold, unmoving, as if placed by the gods to watch her become. Time stretches here, as it often does in dreams. You lean closer. Her eyes flutter open, not in surprise, but with certainty, as if she has waited for this moment across lifetimes. They are dark, unfathomable, like ink poured from memory. Her breath is steady. The room responds. You hear footsteps in the hall, hushed voices in Greek and Demotic. The world outside spins with plots and shifting alliances, but inside this room, all is still. This is the beginning, not of a reign, but of a presence, one that will shape the rise and ruin of men, one that will outlast monuments. A servant places a lotus blossom near her head, the petals trembling from the touch. It is a small gesture, but the kind that echoes. One day, she will float down rivers draped in silk, wrapped in myth, spoken of as goddess and temptation. But now, she is simply a breath in the dark. You almost forget this isn't a memory. She closes her eyes. The wind returns, curling around your ankles, carrying the scent of papyrus and salt. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell rings softly from a tower. Time resumes its pace. She sleeps, but history has already awakened. Later that night, the torchlight curls low across the marble floor. The silence still hums with the memory of her first breath. You drift through the palace like fog. The corridors here don't sleep. They wait. Columns hold the weight of centuries, and the air clings to the scent of cedar wood and honey dust. Servants whisper along the walls, their sandals soft against stone, their words sealed in gesture and glance. You pass another closed door. Inside, Cleopatra is no longer wrapped in swaddling cloth. She sits now, upright and listening, a child barely tall enough to touch the rim of a water bowl, but her gaze stretches beyond the window bars toward the rhythm of the Nile. There is something watchful in her stillness, something more than curiosity. She listens like someone expecting the wind to answer. In her fingers, a fragment of painted tile, blue and broken. She turns it gently, as if feeling for a secret. The mosaic it belonged to once told a myth. Isis, perhaps, or a lioness goddess who held the moon in her jaw. The walls whisper stories here, and she is already learning to hear them. Her tutor is a thin man in worn linen, eyes clouded with age, voice soft as dust. He reads in Egyptian, translates in Greek. Today's lesson is not scrolls, but stars. He unrolls a tapestry sky and hangs it across the ceiling beams. This, he says, is where you come from. She does not blink. She already knows she comes from more than any one story. Symbols float above her. Orion, the dog star, the eye of Horus. But she watches something else. The space between them. Where gods sleep. Where fate hides. Ash drifts in the quiet. Her sister, Berenice, passes by the doorway and does not pause. In her gaze, the chill of rivalry already stirs. Power here is never shared, and the blood between siblings is warmest only until it spills. The moon hangs outside like a silver coin left for the dead. In the courtyard, fig trees rustle with soft movements, guards perhaps, or something older. You move closer. Cleopatra does not notice, or she does, and simply does not react. The child is learning already that eyes must see, but not reveal, and ears must listen without consent. Tonight, the tutor begins a fable, not from Egypt, but from the lands beyond, a tale of a girl who outwitted a sea god, traded her voice for a blade, and spoke kingdoms into ruin. Cleopatra listens. She files the story behind her breath, where it waits beside the others, not as fantasy, but as instruction. The torch dims. Her hand curls around the tile. She hides it beneath a fold of her robe, not as a treasure, but as a seed. Outside, the wind shifts. The Nile has risen a finger's breadth overnight, and Alexandria dreams not of war, but of preparation. Already the girl queen gathers her materials, language, silence, memory, and myth. Not tools, weapons. In the room's final hush, the tutor says her name once more. Not princess, not child, just Cleopatra. As if saying it confirms something eternal. You lean into the stillness. Nothing moves, not even you. But the story continues. The silence still hums. Outside, the sky has turned the color of wet bronze, and a hawk circles high above the eastern tower. Later that week, you drift into the heart of the palace, where the air cools and thickens with stone and story. Here, the corridors twist deeper, not toward the throne room or banquet hall, but toward a wing few walk without purpose. The scent of ink is everywhere, bitter, ancient, clean. You pass another closed door. The library's breath wraps around you before you even reach it. Not the grand hall of scrolls seen by dignitaries and scholars. No, this is the other wing, the one behind veils of papyrus and rusted locks. Cleopatra comes here barefoot, soundless, the sandals left behind. She does not need permission. She is the daughter of a whispering lineage, and the shadows recognize her before the guards do. The torch in her hand gutters once, startled by the change in air. Then it steadies. She moves past shelves too tall for her height, yet she walks as though she owns every step between hieroglyph and Greek. The walls are crowded with fragments, stones etched with dying dialects, feathers laid flat beside inkless reeds, broken statuettes left in corners like offerings. And in one alcove, a mosaic of Thoth, half-faded, the god of wisdom missing his ibis beak. She touches the absent space as if to say, "I will remember for you." The silence here is not empty. It is charged. A scroll lies unrolled before her, pinned down by obsidian weights. Not a royal archive or military record, but a poem, half lost, half translated. It speaks of two stars chasing each other forever across the night, never meeting, but always guiding. She does not ask for help reading it. Her fingers move along the faded script like a child tracing a lullaby she has never heard but somehow knows. A bell rings again, softer this time. Behind her, an old librarian watches. He says nothing, but nods once when she catches his gaze. They've made a quiet pact. She does not speak of this room, and he does not ask why she prefers verses to bloodlines, myths to treaties. He understands what few others do. This girl is not becoming a queen. She is remembering how to be one. On a high shelf rests a cracked jar labeled Dust of Babylon. She lifts the lid and inhales the remnants of fallen cities. Beneath her feet, the stone is worn where scholars once knelt. The past presses in, not as weight, but as fabric. She gathers it around her like a cloak. A breeze moves through the chamber. Not from outside. It comes from within the walls, like breath exhaled after centuries of waiting. You almost forget this isn't a memory. In a corner, there's a table scarred by fire. On it, a single blackened page remains, stuck to the wood. She leans down and presses her cheek to it, not to read it, but to listen. Some knowledge only survives through heat and silence. Her lips move silently. A prayer? A spell? Or the beginning of a thought not yet ready to speak? This is not a school. It is not even a sanctuary. It is her forge. And the girl who will one day stand before Rome does not wear gold or sit on thrones in this hour. She wears soot on her fingers and a fire behind her eyes. As she leaves, she tucks a phrase into her sleeve. Not a quote, not a decree, just a line from a forgotten poet. We are not made of time. We are what remains after it. Outside, the Nile shimmers like an unsent letter, and the library exhales. The silence still hums, but a tension coils beneath it, sharp, silver, alive. The garden within the palace walls is a place of curated beauty, carved fountains, olive trees in perfect symmetry, roses bred to bleed their scent in waves. But tonight, the hedges rustle with something more than wind. You follow soft footsteps across crushed quartz paths until you see them. 3 girls beneath a fig tree, the fruit split and oozing in their palms. Cleopatra stands slightly apart, younger than the others, but with that quiet stillness that unsettles. Her sisters, Tryphena and Berenice, circle her in slow orbit, their laughter too crisp, too bright. Between their words, there are needles. "You always listen too much," Berenice says, licking fig nectar from her wrist. "As if that will make you queen." Tryphena joins in with a smirk. She listens because she cannot speak without sounding like a book. They laugh again, but Cleopatra does not respond. Her eyes settle on a line of ants winding around a root, silent, purposeful, dangerous when provoked. The fig in her hand is untouched. You pass another closed door. Later, they sit at a lesson table draped in linen. A tutor drones on about the Nile's yearly rhythms, but the air crackles with unspoken calculations. Each girl is taking measure of the others. Each one imagines herself cloaked in white linen, wearing the double crown, even now, even as children. Their mother enters, and the atmosphere shifts. She is radiant in a way that has nothing to do with love. Her beauty is precise, polished, calculated. Her gaze lands on Berenice with approval, rests a moment longer on Cleopatra with suspicion. There is something unreadable in her youngest daughter's eyes, and unreadable things are dangerous. You pass another closed door. Night deepens. In their chambers, the sisters braid each other's hair, but their fingers are tight, too fast, tugging as if weaving power into strands. Tryphena begins a story about a priestess who poisons her brother, but Cleopatra interrupts gently. That tale ends differently in the Egyptian version. They stare at her. She says no more, but the silence that follows feels like a sword drawn under a table. In the hallway, a servant drops a clay jar. It shatters. The girls turn as one, like birds startled from a branch. Berenice rises and says too sweetly, "Shall we take a walk?" The moon watches. So does the lion's pelt, hung above the nursery since before any of them were born. The garden again. This time, quieter. They speak less. They move in near silence, circling the stone edge of the lotus pond. Berenice holds something in her palm. You cannot see it, but Cleopatra does. "It won't work," she says softly. Berenice smiles. "Then you try it." She drops a small serpent onto the path. Harmless, its fangs removed, its poison long since spent. A test, a joke. Cleopatra kneels. She does not scream. She does not flinch. She simply places her hand beside the snake's coiled body, palm open. It slides over her skin once, twice, and then slithers away. Tryphena gasps. Berenice's smile falters. "The gods speak in symbols," Cleopatra murmurs. "You should listen more." The breeze shifts. "You're still there." Back in her room, the young girl unrolls a scroll stolen from the restricted wing of the library. An old spell of protection, its ink cracked and curling. She does not speak the words, not yet. But she traces them with her fingertip, again and again, until they are no longer separate from her. From a carved wooden box, she pulls the fig she never ate. It is hard now, withered. She places it in the brazier and watches it burn. Smoke curls like a crown, and in the embers, the sisters' laughter dissolves into silence. The silence still hums, deeper now, like a drum beneath the floor, beating softly beneath marble dreams. It is long past sunset when you find her again, alone on the roof of the palace. The stars above shimmer in layers, filtered through the incense rising from the city below. Alexandria breathes in a rhythm that few can hear, but she hears it. A child still, but only by age. Tonight, the moon glows amber, and the sky curves like a bowl of wine about to spill. Her hands rest on the cold limestone ledge as she listens, not to music, nor words, but to the space between sounds. A thin man with a bent back approaches from the stairwell, robes swept with dust, the scrolls in his arms bound in leather and twine. He says nothing as he settles beside her. This is not a night for teaching. This is a night for watching. Cleopatra does not look at him. Her eyes remain on the sky. "I counted 4 comets this year," she whispers. 4, and none announced, he replies. The gods forget their duties. She smiles faintly, but the expression is short-lived. There is something else beneath it. A hunger, perhaps, or a burden already forming. The tutor unrolls a chart of stars, painted not in black and white, but in ochre, crimson, and sea blue. "The desert sky is predictable," he says, "but it doesn't always tell the truth. Sometimes it simply listens." She nods. "So do I." A candle flickers. Your breath slows. He begins the lesson without asking. This is Sothis, the star that returns each year before the Nile floods. She is a guide, but also a warning. Cleopatra's fingers trace the path of the goddess star, her touch soft, reverent. The scroll crinkles beneath her palm like dried leaves. The air is cold on the roof, but she does not shiver. He speaks of orbits, of eclipses, of the shadow of the earth across the moon's face. But Cleopatra listens for something else, the meaning beneath the meaning. Why floods matter? Why kings fall? Why shadows move when no one calls them? The tutor pauses and studies her face. "You will rule one day," he says. "No," she replies. "I will decide." He chuckles, then stops. She wasn't joking. The breeze lifts her hair. Below them, Alexandria flickers in lamplight, and the wind carries songs from the harbor, fishermen singing to the sea, lovers singing to their loneliness. Cleopatra closes her eyes for a moment, and the stars feel closer. He points to another constellation. That one was named for a woman who betrayed her empire to save her child. She tilts her head. Was she punished? She became fire. She doesn't ask what that means. She understands that some answers must be lived. The silence is heavier now. A servant appears at the doorway to the roof. The Queen Mother has summoned her daughters. A feast has begun below. Grapes and pomegranates, honey-glazed meats, music that sounds like it belongs to someone else's story. Cleopatra stands. Her robe flutters like a shadow behind her. She takes one last look at the stars and whispers a word you can't hear. Then she turns to descend. But halfway down the stairs, she pauses. "What happens," she asks the dark, "when the stars lie?" You almost forget this isn't a memory. Later that night, when the roof is empty and even the city has fallen quiet, a scroll flutters open where she left it. The page stirs once, as if exhaling, then rests. The star Sothis continues her arc across the heavens, watching, waiting. And in the quiet, a young girl gathers knowledge not as treasure, but as armor. The silence still hums, though music begins to weave through it, notes dripping like honey from a golden bowl. You descend now, away from rooftops and stars, into the warm pulse of the palace. The great banquet hall stretches like a cavern carved from alabaster and flame. Torches crackle along the walls, casting shadows that dance without permission. The marble floor gleams wetly beneath bare feet. It is not water. It is oil, wine, fruit juice, and beneath it all, intention. Cleopatra steps into the hall with her sisters. The air blooms around them, frankincense, myrrh, the sharp bite of roasted citrus. Laughter curls through the room, thin and hungry. Men in silk, women in painted linen, ambassadors and priests, generals and ghosts, all gathered in celebration. Of what? No one seems sure. Gold spills from the table in waves, dates stuffed with almonds, roasted quail in cinnamon sauce, pyramids of pomegranate seeds glistening like blood drops in moonlight. Goblets overflow with honey wine, their rims kissed in silver. You pass another closed door. She is seated between her sisters, but the space around her seems quieter, more observant. A courtier tries to speak to her in Latin. She answers in flawless Greek, then switches to Egyptian. The man stumbles. She smiles. She is not yet queen, not even heir. But the room has begun to tilt in her direction. Across the table, Ptolemy XII, her father, clutches a goblet as if it might keep his crown from slipping. He laughs too loudly. His fingers tremble when he gestures. Rome has begun to whisper in his ear, and he cannot tell the difference between flattery and fire. Cleopatra watches. She is always watching. A platter arrives, lamb soaked in rosewater, its steam curling like a promise. Her sister Berenice leans forward and whispers, "You should eat. It may be your last chance." Cleopatra answers without turning, "It may be yours." The breeze shifts. You're still there. A performer begins a slow dance in the center of the hall. His arms trace arcs in the torchlight, his feet silent on the stone. The music is strange, half Egyptian, half Roman, a blending or a warning. Cleopatra's fingers trace patterns in the condensation of her goblet. The silver ring on her thumb is too large. It was not hers, once, but it is now. You notice how she leans forward slightly, how her head tilts when the performer flicks a blade hidden in his sleeve. No one else seems to see it, or perhaps they pretend not to. This is not a feast. It is a battlefield dressed in silk. At the edge of the hall, a Roman envoy raises a toast. His Greek is poor, his arrogance fluent. He speaks of alliances, of promises between crowns, of friendship in the shadow of tribute. Cleopatra listens, but not to him. She listens to how her father nods, how her mother tightens her grip on her goblet, how Berenice's smile spreads too wide. A servant spills a bowl of figs. The sound echoes like thunder across the floor. The music stops, only for a moment. Then it resumes. Ash drifts in the quiet. Later, when the guests have thinned and the air hangs heavier with smoke, Cleopatra lingers. She walks the hall slowly, tracing her fingertips along the cold backs of chairs. One still holds the warmth of a body recently gone. She sits in it. The crown on the dais ahead of her gleams in firelight. A cat slips from beneath the table and leaps into her lap. She doesn't flinch. It stares at her, blinks once, then turns its head toward the dais, as if to say, "Watch." Cleopatra does. A servant enters to clear the dishes. He pauses when he sees her, unsure whether to bow or speak. She nods once. That is enough. He leaves her there, alone, still, silent. Where others see a child in white linen, the night sees something else entirely. And the throne above her watches too. The silence still hums, but now it carries an edge, sharp, metallic, like a blade just drawn from oil. The days that follow are quieter, though the wind through the palace no longer feels soft. You pass beneath archways hung with incense braids and watch Cleopatra move through the halls with quieter steps and heavier thoughts. A crown waits for her, somewhere ahead, but it will not come on silk cushions. Not in this house of ghosts. Ptolemy XII, her father, grows thinner in presence, fatter in fear. He retreats behind wine and whispers, behind Roman promises paid in coin and concession. The court murmurs of rebellion, of Alexandria's patience thinning, of the people's hunger not for bread, but for blood. And then the thunder breaks. Cleopatra is called to a courtyard she rarely visits. It smells of sun-baked stone and seaweed dragged in from the harbor. There, she finds her mother standing beside a boy, barely older than her brother, her new husband. By decree of the house of Ptolemy, they are now king and queen together. Children, bound by law and lineage, not by choice. The silence is heavier now. The city barely celebrates. No trumpets, no silver-draped processions, just murmured blessings and veiled glances from guards who do not meet her eyes. At the coronation, Cleopatra wears a crown too large for her head. The double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt rests like a burden, not a triumph. The boy, Ptolemy XIII, does not speak. He stares ahead with the glassy gaze of someone repeating instructions. His advisors stand behind him like shadows, their robes more elaborate than his. One of them places a scroll into his hands. He reads from it, faltering. Cleopatra says nothing. But when he stumbles on the name of Isis, she corrects him. Not loudly, just loud enough for the statues to hear. Later that evening, she stands alone in the temple of Isis. The walls are painted with stories of power hidden in womanhood, of magic sung into stone, of gods who hide their names until the moment they strike. She kneels before the altar and speaks no prayers. She simply listens. A bell rings again, softer this time. The Nile outside swells early that year. The people take it as a sign. Some say it means the gods favor the new rulers. Others say it is a warning. Within weeks, power begins to shift. Edicts are issued not in Cleopatra's voice, but in that of her brother's regents. Her name disappears from coins. Her guards are replaced by men she does not know. The scrolls she once read in the library are sealed away, the tutors dismissed. She is still called queen, but the air around the word is hollow now. She begins to write notes in the margins of her mirror frame, phrases in 7 languages, reminders of truths that can't be rewritten. Each one written in ink that smears easily but never disappears entirely. One day, she opens her chambers to find her seat at court reassigned. She stands for the whole session. No one offers her a cushion. She does not sit again, even when a chair returns. You almost forget this isn't a memory. At night, she speaks to her mother in soft tones, asking nothing but listening to everything. The queen's face is pale these days, her words measured. She warns Cleopatra to guard her name. "It's the only thing you own," she says, "and the first thing they'll try to steal." Then, one dawn, the queen is gone. No mourning is declared. No procession is held. A fig seller whispers in the market, "The river took her." But Cleopatra knows better. She walks the halls that day in silence, her steps echoing like hoofbeats in a desert. She touches the lion's pelt in the nursery on her way past, not out of nostalgia, but promise. Something must end now, so something else may begin. The silence still hums, but now, beneath it, the river begins to whisper, a low, endless murmur that doesn't care who wears the crown. Later that season, the Nile swells beyond its comfort. It licks higher into the banks, soaks into the feet of temples, laps at the gates of Alexandria like a visitor denied too long. It has seen queens before. It has seen kings fall. It does not judge, but it remembers. Cleopatra stands at the edge of the embankment wrapped in a cloak dyed the color of dusk. Behind her, the city watches with eyes shuttered by fear. In front of her, the river moves, slow and deliberate, like something choosing when to strike. Fishermen have been found dead this month. Priests say the water spirits are restless. Commoners speak of rebellion rising with the tide. But inside the palace, it is not gods who stir. It is men. The breeze shifts. You're still there. Her brother's regents, those men in layers of law and deceit, have begun a campaign of erasure. Cleopatra's name is scraped from documents, her likeness removed from temple carvings. Her advisors vanish one by one. A childhood friend is found poisoned. Another flees. Her quarters are moved to the north wing, far from the council chamber. Still, she does not bend. Instead, she walks each morning to the river, as if the Nile might offer her counsel. She brings offerings, pomegranate peel, papyrus strands, the feather of a heron found on the temple steps. She does not ask for signs. She gives them. On the 7th morning, the river offers something back. A body, wrapped in linen, mute, floating. A servant loyal to her. The lips are sewn shut. Cleopatra kneels, reaches into the water and touches the cloth. She does not cry. She does not call for guards. She merely nods. The Nile is no longer a cradle. It has become a mirror, and in its surface, she sees war approaching. The silence is heavier now. Inside the palace, her brother's supporters grow louder. They gather in halls once shared. They carry messages from Rome, signed by men who have never seen the Nile but claim to understand it. Their confidence is painted in gold leaf and bound in scrolls sealed with foreign wax. She sends no replies. Instead, she arranges a quiet feast for 10. Trusted voices, old scholars, a young priestess with a tongue like a whip. They dine beneath a statue of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and balance. No music, just roasted lentils, oil, wine, and plans. That night, a torch burns too long outside the council hall. By morning, 2 ministers are gone. No one asks where. Rumors bloom like algae. She is called sorceress, usurper, snake. But the people in the streets murmur her name with awe, not loud, but enough to disturb the courtier's sleep. One night she hears footsteps outside her chamber, slow, deliberate. A pause, then silence. She doesn't rise. She lets the silence speak, and it does. You pass another closed door. When the edict comes, declaring her stripped of her title, exiled from the palace, it is not delivered with force, just a folded papyrus left beside her untouched bowl of figs. She reads it once, then she burns it with a candle. At dawn, she does not flee. She leaves. In a simple robe, with a scroll tucked beneath her arm and 2 loyal attendants by her side, Cleopatra steps onto a riverboat and drifts south. No banners, no guards, just the river beneath and the city behind. The Nile parts for her like it remembers, and somewhere in the rush of current and the sigh of reeds, the land begins to whisper. A queen does not leave. She retreats, and then she returns. The silence still hums, but softer now, like cloth torn and sewn again, like a breath caught in the throat of exile. The Nile carries her gently at first, as if unsure whether to cradle or challenge. The city fades behind her, not with fury, but with indifference. No guards chase her, no cries echo. Alexandria does not weep for its daughter, but the river remembers. The small papyrus boat glides through reeds tall as men, past farmers who pause with their baskets of barley to stare at the girl with the lion's gaze. She wears no crown, her feet are bare, and yet, when she passes, no one speaks. They bow their heads, not in submission, but in respect. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. Her 2 companions speak little. One tends the tiller with silent reverence, the other reads softly from a scroll of healing spells. They eat what the land offers: figs from branches, river fish caught by moonlight, bread baked on stones warmed by afternoon heat. Cleopatra keeps to the center of the boat, eyes fixed on the horizon. She is not escaping. She is listening. At night, she sleeps beneath open sky, the stars no longer painted above her, but real, cold, and infinite. The wind moves across the surface of the water with long fingers. She lies awake, arms folded, thoughts fluttering like moths drawn to a future they cannot yet reach. In dreams, she sees the throne room flooded. Her brother's face a mask of wax. The regents melt like statues caught in too much sun. And always, always, Rome looms just beyond the curtains, watching, smiling. She wakes with the name of her mother in her mouth, but speaks it to no one. The silence is heavier now. On the 4th day, the boat docks near a temple carved into the cliffside, ancient even by Egyptian reckoning. The priests there welcome her not as queen, but as kin. They see her lineage in the way she bows, in the syllables of her greetings, in the depth of her stillness. They lead her into the inner sanctum, where the air smells of crushed cedar, soot, and rose ash. A statue of Isis rises before her, half shattered by time, but still radiant in moonlight. The goddess's eyes are chipped, her lips broken, but her hands remain, open in both warning and embrace. Cleopatra kneels, not as a supplicant, as a mirror. A priestess offers her ink and papyrus. "Write what has been taken from you," she says. "Not for the world, for yourself." Cleopatra begins. She writes not of betrayal nor exile. She writes of memory, of names erased, of the weight of silence, of the river's impartial love, of a throne made smaller by the men who sit upon it. The priestess reads the scroll silently, then nods. "You are not unseated," she says. "You are merely between thrones." Cleopatra nods in return. She sleeps that night beneath a canopy of linen embroidered with stars. The lion's pelt, taken from Alexandria without a word, lies folded beside her. Someone remembered. Someone believed she would still need it. You almost forget this isn't a memory. In the morning, she stands atop the cliff and watches the Nile curve like a serpent far below. The wind lifts her hair. Her robe flutters like a banner never lowered. She does not say goodbye when she boards the boat again. She does not need to. The temple fades behind her as the current takes her farther south, toward allies, toward strategy, toward return. The river does not speak. It carries. And in its flow, she becomes something more than daughter, more than exile, more than heir. She becomes inevitable. The silence still hums, but now, beneath its stillness, something tightens. A coil drawing inward, a name preparing to unfurl. The boat docks in the marshes before dawn. Mist hovers low over the river like breath that has lost its speaker. In the distance, Alexandria looms again, but this time it does not welcome. It watches, distant, suspicious, unsure. Cleopatra does not step ashore. Not yet. She waits in the hull, veiled and still, while her companions barter with fishermen and spies, gather news, trace the contours of a city reshaped in her absence. Her name has vanished from the temples, but not from the mouths of the people. They whisper it in alleyways, carve it into fruit crates, mutter it beneath breath when guards pass. In markets and ports, they speak of the girl who faced the Nile and returned. Not as a ghost, not as a goddess, but something stranger, something patient. The breeze shifts. You're still there. Rome sends word. Julius Caesar is in Alexandria now, an envoy turned arbiter, drawn by debts, alliances, and the weight of Egypt's gold. He comes not as a conqueror, but as a man seeking order. Or so he says. Cleopatra sees the opening. She cannot walk through the front gate, so she chooses another entrance. That night, beneath the moon's eye, she is wrapped in a rug, an expensive one, thick with spice dust and stitched with patterns of Horus and storm. Her limbs fold like silk. Her breath slows to the rhythm of the reed boat's oars. No one speaks. The servant carries her, up through the back corridors of the palace, past guards who blink and glance away, through galleries of statues that remember her shape, even if the men around them do not, into the heart of Caesar's quarters, where the torchlight burns low and the scrolls on his table are still unfurled. He looks up as the rug unrolls, and she rises from it like myth awakening from sleep. Not queen, not prisoner, an arrival. Ash drifts in the quiet. For a moment, neither speaks. Then she offers the smallest bow, one drawn from both Egyptian grace and Greek schooling. Her eyes meet his, and something unspoken passes between them. Not seduction, not strategy, recognition. He has seen generals break beneath his gaze. She does not blink. Cleopatra speaks first, not in flattery, but in clarity. Her case is not a plea. It is a calculus. Egypt cannot afford war. The people need food. The Nile's rhythms are delicate. She speaks of governance, not glory, of compromise, not conquest. Caesar listens. Outside, torches sway in the sea breeze, and the city continues its theater of power and betrayal. Inside, Cleopatra reclines on silk cushions, eyes steady. She tells stories, not of herself, but of Egypt, of libraries buried beneath sand, of maps written in stars, of queens who bled into their altars to keep dynasties alive. By morning, he agrees to arbitration, and the wheel turns. You pass another closed door. Soon, the city knows. The tale spreads before breakfast. Cleopatra returned in a rug. Cleopatra smiles with Caesar. Cleopatra has risen. The court stirs in outrage. The regents sputter. Her brother fumes. But the people? They watch. They listen. And when she appears again, this time in white linen edged with cobalt thread, they do not cheer. They bow. Because some returns require no announcement. They are felt. and feared. At the harbor, pigeons circle in slow spirals. The wind picks up. The lion's pelt is hung once more in the nursery. A servant swears it moved in the night. Cleopatra walks the halls of the palace not as a guest, not as a child, but as something the city hadn't prepared for. A queen who needed no coronation to rule. The silence still hums, but it hums in Latin now, measured, unfamiliar, and wrapped in the chill of foreign steel. Later that evening, the palace hosts a new kind of quiet, the kind that follows not absence, but arrival. Caesar is here, not the idea of him, not the whispers, the man himself, wrapped in a red cloak that still smells faintly of war, with parchment skin kissed by a colder sun. He walks through Alexandria as if the city is a map already drawn, but the stones beneath his feet resist him. They remember sandals made of papyrus, not Roman leather. Cleopatra watches him from a shaded arch, veiled in linen the color of pearl. He does not turn, but he knows she is there. You pass another closed door. Their meetings are not public, but the palace hears, and the city listens. She speaks in Greek. He responds in Latin, but meaning finds its way between them. They speak of treaties first, then gold, then tides. He asks about the Nile's moods. She tells him that Egypt does not obey maps. It listens to memory, to stars, to the weight of silence. One afternoon, they stand in the palace garden, surrounded by flowering oleander and the distant call of cranes. She holds a papyrus leaf between her fingers. "What do you see when you look at this?" she asks. "A weed," he replies. "A record," she answers, and that is the difference between them. The silence is heavier now. He tells her of Rome, of its marble ambitions and crumbling alliances, of senators with blades beneath their robes, of a republic pretending not to be a monarchy, of his own face stamped on coins he cannot eat. She listens, tilting her head slightly, like a priestess before an unfamiliar flame. She asks him, one night, what he fears most. "Nothing," he says. She smiles. "Then you have much to learn." The next evening, he brings her a coin minted with his likeness. She accepts it, studies it, then drops it into a bowl of milk and watches the image dissolve. He does not speak, but he understands. A bell rings again, softer this time. The city simmers. Ptolemy XIII, her brother, her puppet king, grows more frantic by the hour. His advisors seethe. His guards double in number. The palace becomes a furnace of glances, tension curled like thread about to snap. Still, Cleopatra and Caesar walk the halls. Not arm in arm, but like two stars learning to orbit. Some nights, they speak of myths, Isis and Osiris, Mars and Venus. Other nights, they do not speak at all. She reads poetry aloud in Greek, and he listens, not always understanding the words, but the way she folds them in her mouth like a blade. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Then comes the fire. Whether it begins in the stables or the soldiers' quarters, no one can say. But it leaps fast, swallows fast, and soon the edge of the great library, one wing, perhaps two, is smoldering into black sky. From the balcony, they watch together. Cleopatra grips the railing. Caesar grips nothing. She does not scream. She does not cry. But her voice shakes when she speaks. "They are not scrolls. They are voices," he replies. "Voices can be remembered." She looks at him, and the silence between them grows teeth. Later, when the flames are ash and the smoke has thinned, she walks barefoot through the ruined garden. A single page drifts from the embers and lands at her feet. She picks it up, half charred, half saved. She tucks it into her sleeve, not to read, to carry, to remind, that even winter from the west can burn. The silence still hums, but it hums through marble now, through pillars cold as judgment, through streets where wolves wear togas and call themselves senators. The Tiber is not the Nile. It is narrower, colder, less willing to whisper. But Cleopatra steps from her barge into Rome with no fear. The hem of her robe trails over foreign stone. She walks beside Caesar, though not behind him. The people stare, some curious, some scornful, most simply uncertain. Who is this woman who arrives from sand and incense, wrapped in linen finer than Roman silk, her voice too soft for the forum but too sharp for the Senate? She smiles, but it is not a smile of diplomacy. It is a smile of prophecy. You pass another closed door. The city speaks of her in corners and courts. She is the sorceress of Alexandria. She is the queen who bewitches Caesar. She is Egypt itself, with coal-lined eyes and lips dipped in flame. But no one dares call her unimportant. Caesar gives her a villa across the Tiber, separate but not hidden. She fills it with papyrus and musicians, servants who speak Demotic, a priest of Isis, and a garden built to smell like Alexandria after rain. The Roman nobles sneer, but their wives copy her perfume. Her son, Caesarion, plays among red poppies in the garden. His curls catch sunlight like a crown not yet forged. Rome does not know what to do with him, this child born of empire and myth. He giggles at pigeons. He does not yet understand that his name is already political. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. She attends no Senate meetings. She is granted no title. But Caesar sees her often, and his seeing reshapes the room. One night, she dines in a marble atrium. Cicero arrives late, his sandals tapping in disapproval. She pours him wine herself. He refuses to drink. She sips from his cup instead, smiles, and continues her story about how reeds bend during flood season, but do not break. He leaves early. She watches him go, eyes calm. Caesar brings her scrolls, Latin translations of Homer, war records, treatises on law. She brings him amulets from tombs, a prayer carved into turquoise, a scarf woven in a pattern no Roman loom can replicate. They exchange these things not as lovers, but as mythmakers. Ash drifts in the quiet. The people grumble. The Senate murmurs. A statue is unveiled. Caesar cast in bronze, arms open, gaze toward the horizon. At his feet, a woman is carved, not named, but unmistakable. A queen, a foreign queen. The forum stirs like an animal sensing change. Cleopatra walks its edge one afternoon, veiled, unnoticed, or so they think. She listens to marble voices. She watches the crows circle the rooftops. She traces her fingers across the names etched into stone and whispers each one aloud. When she returns to her villa, she writes down 5 of those names. Then she burns the page. You almost forget this isn't a memory. One night, a senator's wife sends her a gift, an ivory rattle for Caesarion, carved in the shape of a she-wolf. Cleopatra accepts it graciously, then stores it in a drawer that never opens again, because she understands symbols, and she knows how wolves behave when they feel threatened. In the villa's garden, a fig tree blooms unseasonably early. Cleopatra walks past it each morning, and does not pick the fruit. The silence still hums, but now it sways like a lullaby, sung in 2 languages, dreamed in 2 worlds. The sun over the Tiber is softer than Egypt's, but it still paints the villa in amber light. In the garden, among reeds grown from imported Nile silt, a child chases birds with bare feet. His name is Ptolemy XV, Philopator Caesar, but his mother calls him Caesarion. He laughs as he runs, arms wide like sails, the hem of his tunic fluttering. The birds scatter into olive branches. The sky answers in Roman blue. Inside the villa, Cleopatra watches him through gauze curtains. She is seated cross-legged on a cushion stitched with symbols older than Latin. In her hands, a scroll, unread. Her eyes are not on the words. They are on him. The silence is heavier now. His eyes hold both mirrors and shadows. The tilt of his nose is Egyptian. His mouth, Roman. His curls dance with the sun, but his gaze, when it stills, carries something else. A knowing. A weight. He is not old enough to speak in full sentences, but already he listens. Already he watches. Cleopatra has taught him to recognize sounds not just by tone, but by silence. He knows when footsteps are hers, when they are not. She teaches him Egyptian first, not Greek, not Latin, because words shape memory, and she wants him to remember where water sings in black soil. You pass another closed door. Caesar visits often, but never alone. Always with guards, scribes, or senators trailing behind like shadows that think themselves necessary. He lifts his son in strong arms, but only briefly. He speaks to the boy in Latin. He asks questions. He never waits for answers. One evening, Caesar holds the child longer. The boy rests his head against his father's shoulder. Cleopatra watches from the edge of the atrium, face unreadable. Caesar speaks, almost to himself. He could unite two worlds. Cleopatra replies, or be crushed between them. He doesn't answer, but something in his eyes flinches. A bell rings again, softer this time. The rumors in Rome grow louder. The queen wants a throne for her son. She wants Caesar to make him king. She wants Rome to bow. Cleopatra says nothing. She begins spending more time by the altar in the garden. It is a simple stone slab, draped in linen, ringed with figs and acacia. She lights incense carved in lotus shapes. She prays, not for protection, not for peace, but for clarity, for silence that speaks the truth. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Caesarion grows. Each morning he stands taller. Each word he learns holds more weight. He mimics gestures he sees, the wave of a senator, the nod of a priest, the stillness of his mother when she listens and says nothing. Cleopatra begins writing a new kind of scroll, part story, part riddle, part inheritance. Not a record of battles, but of breath, of fire disguised as lullaby. She calls it the Book of the Middle Child. When asked why, she says only, "He was born between powers. He will always walk the line." Ash drifts in the quiet. One night, a messenger arrives with no scroll, only a whispered phrase. The Senate debates inheritance. Cleopatra says nothing. She lifts her son into her arms and carries him into the garden. She shows him the constellations, points out Sirius, the great Falcon, and the broken path of the river star Sothis. He leans his head against her, and for a moment, mother and son are only that, just two hearts beneath one sky. But even then, Rome watches. Even then, names begin to sharpen, and even love can become a blade. The silence still hums, but now it carries an echo of metal against flesh, of footsteps in marble halls, of a name whispered one last time. Rome wakes that morning to birdsong and blood. The sun glints off rooftops and blades. The Forum, always alive with voices, is strangely still. Then comes the rush, the screams, the thunder of sandals, the breathless messengers stumbling from shadow to shadow. Caesar is dead. Cleopatra hears it not from a herald or a friend, but from the absence. His guards do not appear at the gate. His scrolls are not delivered. The streets around her villa go quiet in a way that speaks too loudly. She knows before anyone says it. The silence is heavier now. They say it happened in the theater of Pompey, that the senators stabbed him 23 times, that Brutus wept, that his blood pooled in the folds of his toga like spilled ink over law. They say it was for the Republic, but Cleopatra understands better. It was fear. It was Rome eating its own. She walks to her son's chamber and lifts him from his sleep. He blinks, murmurs a word in Egyptian, curls against her shoulder. She carries him to the window and stares across the city that no longer belongs to her, if it ever did. A bird lands on the sill, then another. The wind shifts. The bells begin. Not in mourning, in warning. You pass another closed door. Outside, flames catch in alleyways where mobs riot. Noblemen are dragged from their homes. Statues are defaced, then rebuilt. The Senate fractures. New names rise from the smoke. Mark Antony, Octavian, Cassius, Lepidus, each hungry, each armed, each promising order. None mention her, not yet. She prepares to leave. The villa is stripped in silence, scrolls packed in linen, incense extinguished. The priest of Isis kisses her hand and vanishes into the crowd. The poppies in the garden are left unpicked. She boards her ship in darkness. No trumpets, no farewell. Just wind and water. Just her son, and what remains. Ash drifts in the quiet. The Tiber does not weep. It releases them like a stone too smooth to keep. The sea carries her southward, the stars overhead unblinking. Cleopatra stands at the prow of the ship, wrapped in layers of white. Her eyes are dry, her back straight. Rome disappears behind her like smoke that never settles. She whispers to the night, "I warned him. Even stars lie." You almost forget this isn't a memory. At the edge of the sky, Alexandria waits. But it is not the city she left. The throne is no longer empty. The winds are colder, and her name is not enough anymore. Not yet. But it will be. The silence still hums, but now it hums like breath held too long, like a city waiting to exhale, unsure who will return through its gates. Alexandria does not greet her with garlands. There are no processions, no horns, no open arms, just dust, and the sound of sandals against stone. Cleopatra steps ashore at twilight. The harbor smells of salt and smoke. Oil lamps flicker behind shuttered windows. The wind from the sea drags a thin sheet of ash across the shoreline, remnants of revolt, perhaps, or simply the dust of too many names burned in too short a time. She holds her son's hand. He clutches a small amulet carved in turquoise, a gift from a priest long gone. He does not speak, but he walks in step with her. Behind them, the ship rocks gently. Ahead of them, the city breathes. A bell rings again, softer this time. The palace is guarded by strangers now. The halls echo differently. Ptolemy XIII is dead, drowned in a rush of rebellion and Roman pressure. They say the Nile swallowed him, crown and all. Some say Cleopatra wept. Others say she turned away before his body surfaced. Neither is true, and both are. You pass another closed door. The council chamber is filled with men she doesn't know. They rise when she enters, but not in reverence, in uncertainty. Their eyes flick to her son, then to the throne, then to each other. Cleopatra smiles, the same quiet smile that unraveled Berenice, that unsettled Cicero. She takes her seat. No one protests, but none applaud. Later that night, she walks the corridors alone. The tapestries have changed, the colors duller, the dust thicker. A brazier smokes in the corner. Incense burns low, myrrh, rose, a faint trace of sandalwood. It smells like morning. In her chamber, the walls remain untouched. The lion's pelt still hangs. She stands before it and speaks softly in Greek. "I have returned." Then again in Egyptian, "I have never left." The silence is heavier now. Outside, the people are restless. Rome's shadow stretches farther each day. Grain is scarce. Priests argue over omens. The Nile's flood is late. And in the marketplaces, they speak of a queen who speaks in riddles, whose son may be a god or a threat. Cleopatra calls for meetings, not with politicians, with poets, astronomers, merchants, midwives, sailors. She listens. She learns. She builds again, not with stone, but with presence. One morning she walks barefoot through the temple of Ma'at. The high priestess greets her with no words, just a nod. Together, they light 7 oil lamps. Each flame stands for something lost. Each flame stands for something yet to come. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Her son grows taller. His speech now holds rhythm. His gestures echo hers. He learns to read by whispering hieroglyphs into water, watching the ripples carry the words back to silence. And Cleopatra begins drafting letters, not to Octavian, not to Rome, but to herself. Records, strategies, prayers. She writes them in invisible ink, lemon and ash, tucked between pages of old scrolls, not to be read, to be remembered. Because she knows now what Rome never will. A throne is not built on marble. It is built on breath, on waiting, on return. The silence still hums, but now it hums like distant thunder, pulsing just beyond the horizon, as if a storm remembers your name. It begins with sails, black as ink, blooming along the coast like omens. Then come the drums, low and deliberate, echoing across the water before the ships even dock. Alexandria stands still, tasting salt in the wind and iron in its throat. Mark Antony has arrived. He does not come like Caesar did, with scrolls, decrees, and precision. He arrives like weather, loud, laughing, wearing armor polished to catch firelight, and a cloak heavy with battle ash. Where Caesar was winter, Antony is summer. But Cleopatra watches him with the same eyes. You pass another closed door. Their meeting is arranged at twilight, in a gallery of glass and gold. She waits on a dais beneath a canopy carved with stars. Incense coils at her feet. The walls breathe perfume and torchlight. He enters without bowing. Their eyes meet. And in that moment, history tilts. Not violently, not visibly, but like a ship catching a sudden breeze. He greets her in Greek. She replies in Latin. They smile. She offers him wine steeped in rose petals. He drinks, then jokes it tastes like poetry and poison. She answers, sometimes they are the same. Ash drifts in the quiet. Antony stays, not as a guest, not as a conqueror, but as something else. He attends council meetings but never sits beside her. He rides through the streets without guards. He dines with scholars and street performers, with priests and soldiers, and once, famously, with a camel named after a senator. He becomes a rumor wrapped in laughter. She becomes a myth reborn in silk. Together they become something neither Rome nor Alexandria has words for. In private, they spar. Not with blades, but with stories. She tells him of Sothis, the star that precedes the flood. He tells her of a hawk that once followed him through 3 provinces and disappeared on the day of victory. They are not lovers. Not yet. But they are already conspirators. The silence is heavier now. At night, they walk the gardens barefoot. He teaches her Roman drinking songs. She teaches him to listen to the wind between pillars. He tries to tame a leopard she keeps chained by the fountain. She watches him fail, then gives it a name. In the city, murals begin to appear. Isis and Dionysus dancing across temple walls. The people understand, or think they do. Cleopatra doesn't correct them, nor does Antony. One evening they speak of futures. He speaks of Rome. She speaks of Egypt. He names the stars. She names what comes after them. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Then, quietly, she places a ring in his hand. It is shaped like a serpent, its tongue curled around its own tail. For memory, she says. He kisses it. Not her, not yet. But the air around them changes, and in the distance, the sea begins to rise. The silence still hums, but now it hums with flute and drum, with sandalwood smoke and wine spilled over silver, as if the world has decided to dream aloud. They meet again, not in Alexandria, but on water. The Euphrates shimmers beneath a golden dusk, wide and waiting, its surface painted with rose petals and torchlight. Cleopatra arrives not as a guest, not as an ally, but as a goddess returning to her temple. The barge is a temple of its own, carved ebony prow shaped like a swan, Sails dyed Tyrian purple, oars dipping in time to music. Dancers line the decks like priestesses. Perfumed wind curls through the air, carrying jasmine, myrrh, and heat. Antony waits on the riverbank, armor glinting, but his breath catches when the ship approaches. He does not call out. He does not command. He watches. And the river between them seems to bow. The breeze shifts. You're still there. Cleopatra steps from the barge as incense burns in brass bowls. Her robe is moonlight and shadow, her crown shaped like the sun's eye. She says nothing as she reaches the shore, just raises her hand in a gesture older than Rome. Antony kneels, not as a soldier, as a man struck by the impossible. That night, the banquet begins, not in halls, but on the decks of her floating palace. Lanterns hang from rigging like captive stars. Musicians play harps shaped like wings. The wine flows sweet and thick, and food arrives in procession. Figs dripping honey, salted fish wrapped in lotus leaves, roasted lamb stuffed with almond and spice. Antony sits beside her, the river rocking beneath them. He drinks deeply, and laughs louder than the wind. She smiles. But behind her lashes, calculation stirs. This is not seduction. This is sovereignty. A bell rings again, softer this time. She tells him stories that no one else hears, of Nile floods foretold in bird patterns, of crocodiles who weep before they feed, of a child once crowned in silence while her brother drowned. He listens like a soldier desperate for a new kind of war. He speaks of Rome, its rot, its splendor, its jealousy wrapped in tradition. He calls her not queen, not consort, but equal. She calls him fool. He grins. She doesn't stop him. Their fingers brush over the rim of a shared goblet. Neither draws back. The music rises. A dancer in gold moves like smoke across the deck. The night vibrates with heat and hunger. But Cleopatra's eyes never leave the river. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Later, when the moon climbs high and the guests doze or drift into private shadows, Antony finds her at the bow, alone. The stars are quieter here, he says. They speak in other tongues, she answers. He takes her hand, not forcefully, not tenderly, as if confirming something both had already agreed to. She leans into him, not in surrender, but in alignment. And the river flows on, unbothered. Ash drifts in the quiet. In the distance, torches on distant hills burn steady. The world is still watching. But for one night, they do not care. They are no longer Rome and Egypt, just two currents, drawn together in the dark. The silence still hums, but now it carries the sound of breath drawn for the first time, and a mother's stillness that speaks louder than celebration. The palace is quiet tonight, not in the way of absence, but in reverence. Somewhere behind thick cedar doors, a cry pierces the air, sharp, new, ancient. A voice not yet shaped by language but already heavy with meaning. Cleopatra exhales slowly, then listens, not to the cry itself, but to what follows. The hush, the heartbeat, the pulse of lineage shifting. You pass another closed door. Twins, a boy and a girl. Born not in the shadow of any one empire, but in the space where two empires collided and, strangely, held. They place the girl in Cleopatra's arms first. Her skin is soft as fig petals. Her mouth purses, not to cry again, but to taste the world. Cleopatra names her Cleopatra Selene, moonborn. Then comes the boy. He is heavier, his grip stronger. He wails louder than his sister and stares with eyes that refuse to blink. She names him Alexander Helios, sun-blooded, light and dark, brother and sister, balance and burden, born beneath the same roof as power, born into its hunger. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. Mark Antony arrives hours later, fresh from a skirmish in the western delta. He carries sand on his boots and the smell of blood on his cloak. But when he enters the room, all of that vanishes. He drops to his knees beside her bed, and for a moment, just a moment, he is not a general, just a man who cannot look away from what they've made. He touches the children gently, whispers their names, then kisses her hand without speaking. She does not smile, but her fingers tighten. Outside, the city lights 1,000 oil lamps. Some say for the children. Others say to keep away what the stars might send. The Nile swells slightly that week. Not flood, not drought, just enough to mark a shift. A priest tells Cleopatra it is an omen. She nods, but says nothing, because she already knows. Ash drifts in the quiet. In the weeks that follow, the palace hums with preparation. Scribes update scrolls. Priests write new blessings. Soldiers train in silence. Word is sent to distant corners of the east. A new dynasty stirs. But Cleopatra does not speak of thrones. She speaks of timing, of balance, of how the moon cannot shine without the sun, and how neither should cast shadows on the other. She nurses her children herself, refusing the silk-cloaked wet nurses who offer. She sings lullabies in Egyptian, tells myths in Greek, hums rhythms remembered from her own mother's silence. When the twins sleep, she walks. She walks the garden paths by starlight, hands tucked behind her back, crown forgotten, sandals absent. She watches the night for patterns. She listens to the wind for warning. You almost forget this isn't a memory. One evening, she places a reed basket between the two cribs. In it, a scroll, not written for court, not for Rome, for them. A scroll that begins not with names, but with this. If you ever wonder why the stars seem to pull in opposite directions, remember, you are both their children, and mine. She rolls it tight, seals it with wax, and waits. Because love is not just birth. It is protection and preparation. The silence still hums, but now it hums behind masks and music, behind painted gods and perfumed wine, as if truth itself has been invited to the feast, but arrives late. The barges bloom again, not for war, not for exile, but for spectacle. Cleopatra and Antony declare themselves divine, not with proclamation, but with presence. Their images appear on coins and murals, Isis and Dionysus, veiled in gold, wreathed in lotus and laurel. The court becomes a stage, Alexandria, a temple, and the world, for a while, believes. The Feast of the Twins is held beneath the moon's fullness. The sky yawns wide and blue-black above a river dressed in floating lanterns. Musicians line the walkways. Scribes record every movement. Perfumed oil burns in dishes shaped like falcons. Even the wind seems rehearsed. You pass another closed door. The twins are paraded in miniature thrones, held aloft by priests. Selene watches with wide eyes. Helios reaches for the torches. The people cheer, not for children, but for omens. Cleopatra stands at the apex of the gathering, a halo of lapis around her temples, her dress layered with pearls and prophecy. Beside her, Antony wears the lion's skin of Dionysus. He laughs easily, pours wine into goblets, crushes grapes between his fingers like rubies. They offer not power, but myth. Not command, but enchantment. But even enchantment costs. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. That night, a play is performed for the court. Cleopatra sits beneath a canopy of silk, the twins curled against her sides, asleep. Antony watches the actors with half-lidded amusement. The story is familiar. A goddess and a storm god fall in love, but their union brings famine. The world forgets their names. The gods fade into shadows. The audience applauds. Cleopatra does not. She watches the smoke from the torches drift upward, curling like serpents into the sky. Her fingers trace the edge of her son's tunic. Her thoughts wander past the music, past the laughter, into the quiet beyond performance. She wonders, at what point does the mask grow into the face? The silence is heavier now. Days later, she visits the temple of Isis alone. No guards, no dancers, no crown. She kneels before the altar, touches her forehead to the stone, and whispers in the old tongue, not asking for favor, but for clarity. Where do gods end, she asks, and where must I begin? The walls do not answer, but a petal from a lotus offering falls. It lands in the basin beside her and dissolves, quickly, entirely. You almost forget this isn't a memory. When she returns to the palace, the hallways are flooded with laughter and lyres. Antony holds court in the eastern chamber, surrounded by poets, generals, and merchants with too many questions. He raises a goblet when he sees her. "Queen of Kings," he calls out. She smiles, but says nothing. That night, she writes a letter to no one. It reads, "The gods have lent me their faces, but they have not taken away my fears." She seals it with her signet and places it beside her daughter's cradle, because even illusions, once worn too long, become second skin, and not even queens can shed them easily. The silence still hums, but now it gathers behind closed doors, in the corners of empty parchment, in the ink that stains fingers long after the quill has been set down. There is a desk in the western chamber where the light falls just so at dusk. Cleopatra sits there most nights now, her children asleep, Antony away, and the palace murmuring with a kind of golden fatigue. She writes, not to him, to herself, to the future, to the parts of her soul she dare not speak aloud. Each scroll begins the same way. Should this never reach you, know that I tried. Ash drifts in the quiet. She does not send these letters. They pile slowly in a box beneath the bed carved with ibises and dreams. Some are confessions. Some are maps. Some are only fragments of sentences that trail into silence. One reads, "You look at me as if I'm still a mystery. I no longer know whether to be flattered or afraid." Another, "Is this love or loyalty born of fire?" Each page smells of lotus and oil. Each one holds a weight heavier than empire. You pass another closed door. Outside the palace, the mood begins to shift. Rome is restless. Octavian tightens his grip. Messages arrive with thinner ink, shorter phrases, less warmth. Antony grows distant, not colder, just heavier. His laughter returns less often. His sleep grows shorter. Some mornings he walks the shoreline in armor, as if waiting for a battle the sea hasn't promised yet. Cleopatra watches without asking. She learns to measure distance not in miles, but in pauses. The silence is heavier now. One letter, folded in gold thread, sits on her lap for 3 nights. She does not open it. It is from Antony. The seal is his, the wax unbroken. On the 4th night, she burns it without reading. You almost forget this isn't a memory. In the garden, the twins play beneath the fig tree. Helios climbs. Selene sings to a pigeon who does not fly away. They are untouched, for now. But their mother sees the clouds forming beyond the hills. She takes ink to parchment again. This time her hand trembles, not with fear, with knowing. She writes, "Empires fall slowly, but hearts fall faster." And then, beneath it, "If this is the beginning of the end, let me choose the silence between us, rather than the noise of what we've become." She folds the letter, does not seal it, places it in the same box. The ink is still wet when the next message arrives. War is coming. The silence still hums, but now it walks with her, echoing in every step across marble, across mosaics that remember too much, across a city that holds its breath when she appears. Cleopatra moves through Alexandria as one who was never exiled. She does not ride, she walks, barefoot on sun-warmed stone, cloak trailing like shadow, guards behind her, silent, always silent. The people do not cheer, they do not cry, but their gazes follow her like incense smoke, upward, uncertain, reverent. Children press their fingers against shop windows. Old women stop mid-prayer. Fishermen lower their nets just to watch her pass. She does not speak. She does not need to. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. She walks through the marketplace, once filled with color and song, now dulled by worry. The spice merchants bow. The weavers nod. The bread sellers glance at the guards and then away. She buys nothing. She touches no coins, but leaves behind the weight of presence. A man whispers, "She is still queen." And someone else replies, "She is more than that now." You pass another closed door. At the edge of the city, where papyrus reeds crackle in the wind and the river leans close like a confidant, Cleopatra stops. She turns to her guards and nods once. They remain behind. She kneels beside the Nile and dips her hands into the current. The water is colder than it should be. She closes her eyes and listens, not to the surface ripple, but to the ancient voice beneath, the one that spoke to her as a child, the one that warned her, named her, carried her. The river says nothing new, but she understands anyway. The silence is heavier now. That night, she returns to the palace and summons her scribes. They bring maps, tattered, ink-stained, some nearly obsolete. She spreads them across the chamber floor and walks among them barefoot, like a priestess in a ritual circle. Each city she steps over is a name that could betray, each border a promise someone else wrote. She circles Actium in red, then looks up at the moon. Its light reflects in her eyes like prophecy. Later, in her chamber, she speaks with her children. Selene asks, "Will the stars change?" Cleopatra answers, "They already have." Helios says nothing, but reaches for her hand. His fingers are warm. You almost forget this isn't a memory. In the library, what remains of it, she finds the scroll she left behind all those years ago. The one with the two stars that chase each other but never touch. She copies the final line on a new piece of parchment, folds it, seals it, and writes only one name on the outside, Antony. Ash drifts in the quiet. The next day, the shipyards fill with motion. Oars are counted, flags inspected, armor polished. But above it all, above the hammers and ropes and shouted orders, is the soft sound of sandals on stone. Cleopatra, walking the palace again. And this time, even the marble seems to bow. The silence still hums, but now it trembles beneath the waves, pulled taut like a sail just before the wind breaks in. Actium, a name that once meant nothing more than coastline and salt, now carved into prophecy. The straits between Greece and destiny, where the gods watch with breath held and the sea waits to collect the fallen. The ships are ready, painted in Egyptian blues and deep Roman reds, their hulls carved with lion heads, sun discs, falcons. Gold-leafed prows glint in the morning light like teeth. But no one feels victorious. Not yet. Cleopatra stands at the edge of the harbor. Her robe is pinned with silver lotus, her brows darkened with kohl. Her crown sits heavy, but her gaze is weightless. She watches the horizon, not for enemies, but for signs, for shifts, for silence. A bell rings again, softer this time. Mark Antony walks beside her, but farther than before. Not in distance, but in spirit. His armor bears dents from arguments never finished. His voice grows shorter. His glances are weighted now, more caution than passion. He speaks of formations, supplies, weather. She speaks of winds, of birds, of dreams. They do not always hear each other. That is new. In the war tent, scrolls clutter the table. Maps are redrawn with shaking hands. Octavian's fleet moves like a shadow that refuses to dissipate. His silence, more dangerous than any blade. The priests say the moon will be crimson tonight. Cleopatra does not ask what it means. She already knows. The silence is heavier now. The night before the battle, she dresses alone. No attendants, no oils, no ceremony, just linen and breath. She finds Antony by the shore, staring into the black waves. He says nothing when she approaches. She places her hand on his. He does not pull away, but he does not grip back. She whispers, "If we fail, will they remember we tried to build something?" He replies, "They will remember what they want." A gull cries overhead. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Dawn. The sea glows like iron heated too long. The ships pull into line. Oars rise in unison like blades. The war horns do not cry. They murmur, low and long, like mourning made into music. She boards her flagship in silence. The deck beneath her is solid, though her stomach feels the tremble of fate below. Antony's ship pulls ahead. She watches him from the stern. The last time their eyes meet, it is across water, across noise, across futures. And then, smoke, arrows, fire, chaos. Ash drifts in the quiet. They say she fled, that Cleopatra turned her ship before the tide did. But the sea knows, and so does she. It was not fear. It was survival. It was knowing which stories would die if she did not carry them. She sails away not like a coward, but like a keeper of embers. And behind her, Actium begins to drown. The silence still hums, but now it hums through smoke and cinders, through the broken breath of a dream just beginning to collapse, through illusions she still dares to shape. The return is not triumphant. It is quiet. The ships glide into Alexandria's harbor like wounded animals, flags torn, sails sagging. The sea salt has stiffened into the crew's skin. Eyes once bright with strategy now blink only to keep out ash. No horns, no cheers, just the crackle of news spreading faster than sails. The battle is lost. Cleopatra disembarks last. Her robes remain uncreased. Her chin does not tremble, but her fingers, wrapped around the carved serpent of her scepter, press tighter than before. The breeze shifts. You're still there. The city is quieter than she remembers. Not mournful, not angry, just suspended, as if waiting to see whether their queen will rise or retreat. She walks the streets in broad daylight. No guards, no procession. Her presence is the procession. Vendors bow. Children step back, wide-eyed. Old men raise trembling hands in half-formed prayers, and she walks through it all, gaze forward, spine unbroken. You pass another closed door. Inside the palace, she calls for her architects, not to build towers, to build theater. She orders columns raised in the garden, draped in imported silk. Murals are repainted, temple bells polished. She begins hosting suppers again, not out of joy, but defiance. The myth must remain visible, if not for the world, then for herself. The silence is heavier now. Mark Antony returns days later. He does not speak when they meet. There are no embraces, no questions. He looks older, like a statue eroded not by time, but by salt. She gives him wine. He drinks without tasting. That night, he stands at the balcony and watches the harbor. She watches him. They do not touch. But when he finally turns, his eyes carry something that breaks a little further each day. She does not cry. She never does. Instead, she begins writing again. This time, proclamations. Decrees. They name her son King of Kings, her daughter Queen of Crete and Cyrenaica, her other children scattered across titles like embers over a map. You almost forget this isn't a memory. The Roman envoy arrives with letters bound in red wax. Octavian demands surrender. Cleopatra reads the scroll 3 times, then sets it aside, and walks into her throne room. She stares at her reflection in the obsidian floor, her own shape fractured by torchlight, and whispers, "If they won't believe in what we were, let them tremble at what we become." Ash drifts in the quiet. Outside, fires are lit in every quarter, not from rage, from resolve. Alexandria will not kneel, not yet, not while a queen still walks her halls. The silence still hums, but now it hums from stone lips, through empty halls, and beneath statues whose eyes were carved not to see, but to remember. Twilight stretches long across Alexandria. The sky bleeds copper into the streets. Shadows lengthen like questions without answers, and the statues begin to speak, not with words, but with presence. Cleopatra walks alone through the Hall of Ancients. Columns on either side rise like petrified trees, each carved with gods and pharaohs, some long forgotten, others still echoing in the prayers of sailors and scribes. She runs her hand along the arm of Thoth, the god of knowledge. His ibis face stares skyward, his beak cracked, but still curved in silent judgment. Behind her, a torch sputters. In front of her, silence waits. You pass another closed door. She comes here more often now, not for comfort, for truth, because the stone does not flatter, it does not reassure, it only endures. Tonight, she stands before a statue of her father, Ptolemy XII. The face is worn smooth by salt winds, the crown chipped, the eyes too blank to offer anything back. She bows her head, but not in reverence, only in recognition. Then she speaks, not to the effigy, but to the air. "You borrowed your crown. I will not." Her voice echoes through the chamber like a bird released into a forgotten tomb. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. Elsewhere in the palace, advisors argue over defenses, over alliances that never wrote back, over gold too heavy to move and ships too splintered to sail. But here, among the statues, Cleopatra hears something else. The old gods rustle in their stillness. The air thickens with unseen memory. She closes her eyes and feels them. The lioness goddess Sekhmet, heat rising behind her breath. The winged Mot, weighing her silence against a feather. The falcon of Horus, circling above her choices. She is not afraid. She is listening. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Later, as the moon leans into the throne room, she places offerings before the largest statue in the city, the goddess Isis. Milk, salt, a single golden fig. She kneels, not in surrender, but in kinship, and whispers, "Let stone remember what the scrolls will erase," then stands and walks away. Ash drifts in the quiet. The next morning, a servant swears he saw tears on the cheeks of a statue. Weather, they say. Condensation. But the stone has never wept before, and somewhere in the western wing, a mural is touched up overnight. One of Isis. But this time, her face looks slightly different, sharper, more knowing, more alive. And if you look long enough, she almost looks like Cleopatra. The silence still hums, but now it hums like breath on glass, as if waiting for the final word, the final weight, the moment when even a crown wonders if it still belongs. The crown rests on a velvet cloth beside her mirror. Not on her head, not yet. It gleams dully in the lamplight, worn but not defeated. The red and white of Upper and Lower Egypt entwined like serpents too tired to strike. It has sat in silence these past weeks, untouched, watching. Tonight Cleopatra reaches for it. Her fingers hover, not with hesitation, with recognition. Because this is no longer a symbol of rule. It is a symbol of resistance. Ash drifts in the quiet. She lifts it slowly and places it on her head. Not in front of a court, not in front of her children. alone, before her own reflection. She meets her eyes in the polished obsidian. There is no ceremony, no prayer, just breath, just truth. She walks through this palace with it on, each corridor greeting her like a memory. Servants part wordlessly. Some bow, some look away. None speak. In the war chamber, her advisors rise as she enters. She does not sit. She stands before the map. Her hand hovers over Egypt, her name still etched across its borders. She speaks quietly. Every line drawn on this map is drawn in fear. A pause. Let us now draw in fire. The silence is heavier now. Mark Antony enters mid-sentence. He looks older, thinner. The fire behind his gaze now more ember than blaze. He sees the crown on her head. Says nothing. But he nods. That is enough. They spend the evening reviewing what remains. Ships, soldiers, walls, gold. It is not enough. But it is what they have, and what they are. Later, in her private chamber, Cleopatra kneels before a basin of water. She leans forward and breathes onto its surface, watches the ripples spread, watches her face blur, then settle. You almost forget this isn't a memory. She writes 2 scrolls that night, one to her son, one to herself. The first reads, "Remember, a crown weighs less than silence, but costs more than gold. If you ever doubt your lineage, listen to the wind. It will remember." The second she does not finish. Just 3 words. "I am still." She folds it before deciding what comes next. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. The next morning she emerges in full regalia, the gold gorget at her throat, the serpent circlet, the sandaled feet kissed with sacred oil. She walks to the balcony, the one facing the harbor. The people gather, not cheering, not weeping, but present. And in the quiet between wind and waves, she raises one hand. Not in command, not in farewell. Just a gesture to say, "I am here." Still. The silence still hums, but now it closes in, like a room without windows, like breath pressed between stone and fate, like a story reaching the page it does not want to turn. The chamber has no view, no breeze, only shadows, and a door that shuts too quietly to be heard. This is where Cleopatra comes now, not to reign, not to plan, but to prepare. The walls are smooth limestone, the floor lined with reeds and wool. A low table bears bowls of unguent fresh-cut lotus, a vial of vinegar. At the far end, a statue of Isis stands unblinking, arms stretched, as if she might still cradle what the world no longer can. You pass another closed door. The war outside moves like a fever. Antony has lost another skirmish. The desert sends no reinforcements. Rome tightens its grip. The palace creaks under the weight of waiting. Servants speak in whispers. Scrolls are burned before being read. Even the fountains have begun to dry. Still, she comes here, alone. Each day, she brings one object, a ring, a lock of her daughter's hair, a scroll of poetry read to her as a child, and places them at the statue's feet, not as offerings, as memory. She does not pray. She does not plead. She listens. Ash drifts in the quiet. One evening she receives news. Antony has fallen on his sword. The message is garbled, full of panic and salt. He thought she was dead. They say he could not bear it. She says nothing, but her hands go still, and the candle beside her gutters, as if choking. She walks to the courtyard, where the fig trees bear overripe fruit that falls without sound. She plucks one, bites, and throws it away. Later that night, his body is brought to her, not with ceremony, with shame. She touches his cheek. It is cold, but still his. She does not weep, not for him, not yet. Only when the guards leave does she press her forehead to his chest and whisper, We were too large for the world we tried to build. You almost forget this isn't a memory. The silence is heavier now. She returns to the chamber. This time the guards lock the door behind her. On the floor sits a basket, woven, plain. Inside, a tangle of figs. And something else. She does not move toward it yet. She lights 3 incense sticks, places them in a triangle. She anoints her wrists with myrrh, braids her hair with gold wire, then, finally, sits beside the basket. She breathes in, and the room seems to breathe out. Everything slows, even the flame, even the memory, even time. A bell rings again, softer this time. She opens the basket. Inside, the asp sleeps. Its scales shimmer like ink. Its breath hisses like a lullaby. She closes her eyes. But the story does not. The silence still hums, but now it coils, slow and fanged, whispering through ivory bangles and breath barely held, as if the final act must be chosen, not stumbled into. The basket remains open. The asp inside does not strike. Not yet. It waits, as she does, not with fear, but with precision. Cleopatra sits upright against the cool limestone wall, her robe pressed smooth, her gold bangles catching what little flicker the lamp offers. Her hands do not tremble. Her eyes do not close. This is not surrender. This is command. A choice drawn from the deepest root of her bloodline. A crown made of silence. The silence is heavier now. She speaks to the asp as if it were a priest. I will not be dragged in chains through the forum. She whispers to it like a daughter. You will be kinder than Rome. And to herself, finally, softly, I was born wrapped in linen and prophecy. I will die the same. She lifts the snake with practiced grace, as if she's done it before, in a dream, in a ritual, in a life where endings are simply doors. The creature wraps once around her arm, twice. Its head rises and waits. You pass another closed door. Her servants are outside. They will not come in. She has made certain of that. One waits with tear-streaked cheeks, pressing her hands together as if in prayer, though no gods are listening. Another holds the scroll Cleopatra left behind. Do not mourn me in pieces. Mourn me in fire, in full flame, as I lived. Let no man write my name as a prisoner. Inside the chamber, Cleopatra lowers the asp to her breast. Her pulse does not quicken. She exhales, and the fangs find her. Ash drifts in the quiet. The pain is not loud. It is a tide, rising through her ribs, folding into her veins, soft as dusk. She leans back, not collapsing, composing. Her fingers brush the stone. Her gaze remains forward. The asp slips away, duty complete. And somewhere in the distance, the Nile stirs. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Time moves differently now. The stone cools. The flame shrinks. Her crown remains in place, not as decoration, as defiance. Her breath slows, a sigh caught between lifetimes. She thinks, not of Caesar, not of Antony, but of her mother's voice, of papyrus reeds, of her daughter's hand, of stars painted on nursery ceilings. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. And when the silence finally falls, it bows. The silence still hums, but now it lingers in a mirror, untouched, a surface that once knew her shape, now forced to remember it alone. The chamber is still, so still the flame has burned out without notice, so still the asp is gone without sound. What remains is her, Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, sitting against the wall, eyes half-lidded, face pale as moonlight washed in salt. And before her, the mirror. A polished disc of bronze, framed in serpent motifs, set on a low table once used for kohl and fragrance. It does not reflect light now. Only memory, only silence, only the breathless echo of what no longer moves. You pass another closed door. A servant enters at last, hands trembling, heart louder than her steps. She kneels. She does not scream. She weeps, quietly, reverently. She takes the crown from Cleopatra's brow and places it on the cloth beside her, folding the linen edge over it, as if covering a sleeping child. She does not touch the queen's face, but she does turn the mirror toward her, so she may see herself one final time. Or perhaps, so the mirror may see her, and never forget. The silence is heavier now. Outside, Rome's messengers wait. Octavian is near. They say he rides like a victor, with parchment instead of mercy. They say he wanted her alive, to parade her in chains, to carve her name into a history she would not write. But history has been denied its humiliation. She left no room for rewrite, no room for spectacle. Only a still body wrapped in linen, spine straight, mouth closed, hands folded over her lap as if holding time itself. The mirror watches. It reflects no blood, no fear, only a woman who chose, only a queen who ended the myth in her own words. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. Word spreads through the palace like breath exhaled after a long prayer. She is gone. No one says her name. Not yet. The halls dim. Guards lower their spears. Even the birds in the courtyard fall silent for an hour that no one marks. You almost forget this isn't a memory. The mirror remains. It is moved to the temple later, set beside offerings of lapis, linen, and wild fig. Some say, if you stare long enough, you'll see her. Not as she was at the end, but as she was before the world asked her to become more than mortal. A girl in silk, a mother of gods, a queen with ink on her fingers and sand in her blood. Ash drifts in the quiet, and the mirror watches still, because symbols do not sleep, and neither do echoes. The silence still hums, but now it hums with the stillness of a severed thread, the hush before the blade falls, the space where a name fades before it's fully spoken. Caesarion is gone before the people realize he's missing, not taken with ceremony, not paraded, just gone. A boy king who never sat fully on his throne, the son of Cleopatra, the son of Caesar, the son of myth. But myths make dangerous heirs, and Rome no longer fears Cleopatra. It fears what comes next. You pass another closed door. They say Octavian sent the order from a marble table in his new villa, a single sentence etched into the edge of a scroll. Too many Caesars is a threat. That was all. The boy was captured near the eastern gate, trying to flee, disguised as a servant. The guard who took him later said, he looked too much like his father. That was the only justification. Cleopatra's final plan, to smuggle him out of Egypt, to preserve the bloodline, collapsed in a morning of steel and silence. There was no trial, no farewell, only the last breath of a legacy unspoken. Ash drifts in the quiet. The room where they brought him is still locked. No one enters. No one cleans. The guards posted at its door lower their eyes when asked. Inside they say his sandals remain, small, worn, too light to leave footsteps on the floor. His scrolls lie open, his name, written in 7 languages, half finished on the wall. Ptolemy the Epiphin. Philopator Caesar. Too long for a tomb, too short for a kingdom. The silence is heavier now. Some say he cried out. Others say he stood without trembling. But the walls do not speak, and the men who struck the blow were never named. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Later, Octavian visits the chamber. He steps across the threshold, spends exactly 1 minute inside. When he exits, he says nothing. But he does not order the room sealed. He allows the sandals to remain. He allows the scroll to curl in the sun. A warning, or perhaps a whisper of guilt. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. In the temple of Serapis, a priest lights a lamp for the boy. No one sees. No one dares extinguish it. It still burns. Even now, though no one speaks his name aloud. Not in the streets, not in the palaces, not in Rome, but in the wind that rushes between pillars when the city is asleep, it sometimes murmurs, "There was once a boy who was born to two worlds and claimed by neither." The silence still hums, but now it frays at the edges, pulled thin by breathless grief, where names echo too late and death arrives too soon. The courtyard is hushed, not with awe, but with aftermath. Antony lies on the stone, armor split, breath shallow, blood seeping from a wound he delivered himself. The blade he used lies nearby, dull, Roman, impersonal, a tool meant for enemies, now turned inward. He thought she was dead. He thought the queen had fallen, and with her, his fire. Ash drifts in the quiet. They tried to stop him. His men shouted, pulled at his arms, pleaded. But none knew how to unmake a man who has already decided to disappear. Now, they carry him, staggering, through the palace he once stalked like a lion. His body grows heavier with every step. The blood follows them, like ink trailing behind a story being erased in real time. He asks for her. Only her. They bring him to the mausoleum, where Cleopatra has barricaded herself. They knock. No answer. He calls her name. Twice. Then chokes on the third. The silence is heavier now. At last a servant pulls a rope. A hatch opens above. They lift his body with ropes, a makeshift sling of linen and breath. He rises like an offering, like a myth in reverse, ascending not toward the heavens, but toward the woman who already left them. Inside, she waits. Her eyes wide, ringed with coal smudged from sleeplessness. She says nothing as they lower him into her arms. She kneels and holds him. You pass another closed door. He tries to speak. His mouth shapes her name, half-formed, broken by blood and regret. She touches his forehead and leans close. He whispers, "I thought you were gone." She answers, "You were wrong." For the first time, he smiles. And then, nothing. You almost forget this isn't a memory. She does not scream. She does not collapse. She holds him until the heat leaves his skin, until the flies grow bold, until the silence reclaims him. Then she lays his head on a folded cloak and kisses his brow. A farewell, a coronation, an ending. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. The soldiers wait outside. They ask no questions when she exits the mausoleum alone. She says only, "It is done," and walks past them with her spine unbent. In the gardens, the fig tree drops a single fruit onto the earth. It splits open. Ants gather. The moon does not shine that night, as if in mourning or shame. The silence still hums, but now it frays at the edges, pulled thin by breathless grief, where names echo too late and death arrives too soon. The courtyard is hushed, not with awe, but with aftermath. Antony lies on the stone, armor split, breath shallow, blood seeping from a wound he delivered himself. The blade he used lies nearby, dull, Roman, impersonal, a tool meant for enemies, now turned inward. He thought she was dead. He thought the queen had fallen, and with her, his fire. Ash drifts in the quiet. They tried to stop him. His men shouted, pulled at his arms, pleaded. But none knew how to unmake a man who has already decided to disappear. Now they carry him, staggering, through the palace he once stalked like a lion. His body grows heavier with every step. The blood follows them, like ink trailing behind a story being erased in real time. He asks for her. Only her. They bring him to the mausoleum, where Cleopatra has barricaded herself. They knock. No answer. He calls her name. Twice. Then chokes on the third. The silence is heavier now. At last, a servant pulls a rope. A hatch opens above. They lift his body with ropes, a makeshift sling of linen and breath. He rises like an offering, like a myth in reverse, ascending not toward the heavens, but toward the woman who already left them. Inside, she waits, her eyes wide, ringed with kohl smudged from sleeplessness. She says nothing as they lower him into her arms. She kneels and holds him. You pass another closed door. He tries to speak. His mouth shapes her name, half-formed, broken by blood and regret. She touches his forehead and leans close. He whispers, "I thought you were gone." She answers, "You were wrong." For the first time, he smiles. And then, nothing. You almost forget this isn't a memory. She does not scream. She does not collapse. She holds him until the heat leaves his skin, until the flies grow bold, until the silence reclaims him. Then she lays his head on a folded cloak and kisses his brow. A farewell, a coronation, an ending. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. The soldiers wait outside. They ask no questions when she exits the mausoleum alone. She says only, "It is done," and walks past them with her spine unbent. In the gardens, the fig tree drops a single fruit onto the earth. It splits open. Ants gather. The moon does not shine that night, as if in mourning or shame. The silence still hums, but now it lives in margins and footnotes, in words crossed out and rewritten, in stories reshaped by hands that feared the truth would last too long. Rome begins the rewrite. It starts quietly, like rot beneath gold. Scrolls are copied with subtle edits. Paintings are retouched, names reordered, dates adjusted. Cleopatra becomes a footnote in Caesar's saga, a shadow behind Antony's flame, a cautionary tale, not a sovereign, a seductress, a sorceress, never a strategist, never a scholar, never a queen who built and bled. You pass another closed door. In the libraries of Rome, scribes are instructed, emphasize her vanity, her jewels, her lovers, not her languages, not her negotiations, not her silences. The library of Alexandria is never rebuilt, and the fire that consumed it becomes symbolic, as if the gods themselves approved of forgetting. Octavian, now Augustus, rules without challenge. He builds temples to victory, altars to himself, but in none of them does Cleopatra's name appear, not in full, not honestly. Ash drifts in the quiet. A statue is erected in the Forum, Dionysus conquering a serpent. No one says her name, but everyone knows. The children of Rome play with wooden dolls painted like queens in linen veils. They pretend to die dramatically. They mimic the asp's bite. They giggle. The memory begins to harden into caricature. But somewhere, quietly, a scroll passes from poet to priest. A letter smuggled out before the fall. It contains a line. Let the victors write their history. We will whisper ours. The silence is heavier now. In Alexandria, in the ruins of the Serapeum, a traveler finds a half-burned document sealed in wax. The wax bears a serpent. The scroll bears no title. But the first words remain. I have walked through the silence, and I have returned. You almost forget this isn't a memory. In a house by the sea, a child asks her grandmother, "Was Cleopatra real?" The old woman smiles, lifts her hand to this breeze, and says, "She still visits the waves at night." And the girl listens, because wind does not lie, and stories, once whispered, never truly go quiet. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. In time, the records of Cleopatra bend, some erased, some reimagined, but all still pulsing beneath the surface. Because history burns easily, but memory smolders. The silence still hums, but now it hums from beneath the earth, through sealed doors and layered dust, through tombs meant not to imprison, but to echo. They bury her in shadow, not in triumph, not in display, but in a mausoleum carved beside the sea, where stone meets tide, and even the wind whispers lower. Her name is not carved on the outer wall, only a serpent, coiled around a lotus, a symbol meant for those who remember, a warning for those who do not. You pass another closed door. Inside the tomb, they place her with care, not reverence, not haste, just stillness. The body is anointed with oil pressed from figs grown in temple gardens. Her skin is wrapped in linen soaked in wine and myrrh. Gold amulets are laid beside her heart, each one carved with a spell of protection, a prayer of defiance, a farewell stitched in metal. Her crown is not buried with her. It remains elsewhere, because even in death, some burdens are too heavy to place on one's brow, and some symbols must outlive their wearers. Ash drifts in the quiet. They lay Antony beside her. His body, broken by war and salt, is wrapped in the same linen. No grand ceremony, no Roman rites, just the breathing silence of those who know. Something greater than conquest ends here. The chamber is lit once, then sealed. 3 doors of stone, 2 floods of sand, one sea that rises and falls against its foundation, as if mourning. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Over time, the world moves on. Empires shift, names change. Alexandria shrinks, the harbor reclaims itself. But somewhere beneath the dust, in that chamber without windows, 2 bodies lie side by side. Not in myth, not in marble, but in the soft hush of truth. They are not gods, not anymore. Just 2 people who tried, and that may be enough. The silence is heavier now. Centuries pass. A traveler digs near the sea. He finds a shard of glass shaped like a serpent's eye. A priest uncovers a coin. It bears a woman's profile, her chin proud, her gaze unreadable. The inscription has worn away, but still, the wind picks up. And if you listen, if you truly listen, you hear stone sing. It does not shout. It does not explain. It only says, "She was here." The silence still hums, but now it hums through glass cases and gloved fingers, through velvet-lined drawers and catalogs, where what once was sacred is now simply labeled artifact. Somewhere in a museum, far from the Nile, a pearl glows beneath soft light, large, imperfect. Its sheen carries the color of dusk on the river. The placard beneath it reads, "Attributed to Cleopatra 7. Provenance debated." No mention of the day she dissolved it in wine, no mention of the wager, no mention of the way it vanished between myth and defiance. Only a number, a note, and silence. You pass another closed door. People lean in to see it. They press their faces close to the glass, whisper theories, take photos, and move on. No one hears the echo, but it lingers, because this was not simply jewelry. It was a statement, a dissolving of wealth into presence, a queen who drank an empire not for pleasure, but for punctuation. The silence is heavier now. Elsewhere, in an auction hall lit like a temple, another piece is displayed. A dagger said to be Antony's, the hilt worn, the blade dulled. They call it the lover's blade. They speak of it as romance, not ruin. They forget that this metal was last warmed by grief. They forget it was lifted by hands that could not bear silence. A voice in the crowd jokes, "Wouldn't Cleopatra be flattered?" But you remember the ink she spilled before the blood. The scrolls burned. The mirrors turned inward. You almost forget this isn't a memory. A scholar in another country opens a crate of fragments, charms shaped like scarabs, a comb made of ivory, a coin with her face scratched half away. He lays them on velvet. He writes a paper. He does not feel the weight beneath them. He does not feel the whisper in the grain of the wood. The one that says, "This was not meant to be held by strangers." Ash drifts in the quiet. The pearl returns to its drawer. Lights dim. Doors close. And the silence becomes whole again. But in the corner of the glass, a fingerprint remains. Someone once reached too close, and in that smudge, the story pulses, not as a relic, not as proof, but as warning. Because some things are not meant to be preserved. They are meant to haunt. The silence still hums, but now it breathes beneath sandals and camera shutters, beneath guidebook voices and forgotten prayers, where ruins pretend to sleep, and whispers pass like wind between stone. A woman kneels beneath an obelisk in Alexandria, not for ritual, not for reverence, just to tie her shoe. And when she rises, she pauses, not because of the sky or the seagulls or the heat, because she hears something, not sound, but presence. The way silence sometimes leans in, too close. You pass another closed door. The tour continues. Children run their hands across ancient walls. A man jokes that the temple stones feel warm, as if still alive. A guide explains that Cleopatra ruled from a palace no longer visible, sunken into the harbor's mouth, washed clean by centuries of tide. There is nothing left, he says. But the stones disagree. Each column carries dust that once lived in her lungs. Each cracked tile remembers her footsteps. Each breeze off the sea carries the same scent of jasmine and ink. The silence is heavier now. In the marsh by the old garden wall, birds nest in the fig trees. They return each spring, no matter the city's changes. They land where she once walked, their feathers dark as coal, their songs full of echoes. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Inside the museum, a girl pauses beside a statue missing its head. She does not read the plaque. She just stares. The curve of the hip, the angle of the hand, something familiar in the way the stone waits. Later, she sketches it in her notebook, but gives it a new face, not based on fact, but on feeling. Cleopatra. Maybe. Maybe not. But the lines remember her anyway. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. In a side alley, a boy plays with a stick carved like a scepter. He does not know the name. He simply lifts it toward the sky and says something in a language only children speak. But the wind picks it up, carries it over the walls, down into the buried chambers, across the cracked mosaics, and through the closed mouths of statues that never truly stopped speaking. And if you listen, if you kneel low enough, you might hear them reply, "She is not gone. She only changed shape." The silence still hums, but now it drifts low over water, where reeds whisper and the sun filters through green veils, where memory wears no crown but still walks like a queen. There is a place beyond the city, where the Nile slows, where the papyrus grows tall, and where footsteps do not echo but disappear. No stones, no monuments, only wet earth, soft air, and the smell of something ancient blooming unseen. Here, the world forgets its borders, and perhaps that's why she lingers. Not Cleopatra, the queen, not Cleopatra, the myth, but something older and softer. Ash drifts in the quiet. You drift through the marsh as though carried. Your feet leave no print. Your breath does not disturb the birds. The reeds sway around you, brushing your shoulders, trailing across your arms like fingers made of memory. You reach a clearing, a ring of still water rimmed with lilies. At its center, a small rise of earth. Nothing marks it. No stone, no statue. Just silence, and scent, lotus, rain, fig. You kneel beside the water, look down, and see not your face, but hers, not a reflection, but an impression, not a ghost, a presence. The wind ripples the water once, then stills. You pass another closed door. Some say she wandered here after death. Others say this is where she dreamed as a child. But the truth doesn't need agreement. Only breath. Only waiting. You lean forward, brush your hand across the lilies. One folds, revealing a carved charm nestled in its petals. A serpent wound around a moon. Not gold, not bronze. Clay, worn smooth by time and tide. You lift it, and feel warmth. Not heat. Remembrance. The silence is heavier now. A heron takes flight. Its wings beat low above the marsh, skimming the water in a spiral. The reeds bow. You almost forget this isn't a memory. Beneath your feet, the mud stirs. Not from movement, from something breathing. Not living, not dead. Something in between. A name held not in books, but in soil, in birdsong, in stillness. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. You leave the charm where you found it. You walk backward from the clearing. The water does not ripple again. But as you go, you hear the faintest voice behind you, a whisper carried not by mouth, but by marsh. And though you cannot be sure, it sounds like a woman saying, "Remember me, only as I chose to be." The silence still hums, but now it flickers with light, faint and golden, as if a breath long held beneath centuries of ash has begun to rise once more. The torch burns again. In a corridor not walked for years, its flame trembles, then steadies, casting shadows onto stone like dancers returned from myth. The air is dry, but not dead. It holds something. A murmur of movement. A warmth not born of fire. The lion's pelt still hangs, tattered now, edges singed. But it remains, above the nursery door, above the place where Cleopatra once took her first steps, where stars were painted on ceilings and lullabies hung thicker than incense. No one visits this hallway, not anymore, but the dust has shifted, and the flame remembers. You pass another closed door. Elsewhere, in the deepest vault of the palace, a scroll falls from a forgotten shelf. No hand touches it, no wind moves, but still, it drops, unrolls, reveals a single line written in smudged ink. Fire does not forget the hand that struck the flint. Outside, Alexandria stirs in its sleep. Shutters rattle. A window creaks open. The fig tree in the courtyard bears fruit too early. The night tastes of river and rose. Ash drifts in the quiet. A guard on patrol pauses beneath a portico. He sees the torchlight flickering where no flame should be. He draws closer. Listens. There is no voice, only the sound of silk brushing stone. He calls out. No one answers, but something brushes past him in the dark. Cool, fragrant, familiar. He grips his spear tighter and does not speak of it again. The silence is heavier now. In the eastern wing, the statue of Isis shimmers. A drop of oil rolls down the altar as if weeping. The priest who tends her shrine returns at dawn and swears the offerings have shifted. No one believes him, but none remove them. You almost forget this isn't a memory. And yet, what is memory, if not a room visited too often? What is a torch, if not a question made of flame? What is legacy, if not the breath that moves through a corridor long after the footsteps fade? A candle flickers. Your breath slows. The lion's pelt stirs once. A breeze moves without source. A flame bends toward a shape unseen. And Alexandria, ever watching, ever listening, hears something it once knew rise again. A whisper behind the walls. She is not gone. She is returning. The silence still hums, but now it walks beside others, unnoticed, passed from face to face, step to step, through generations who do not know what they carry. Children run through the square at midday, kicking up dust, laughter slicing through the hush like sunlight through curtains. They wear simple clothes. They do not wear crowns. But one girl walks differently. She moves not ahead, but through, unhurried, balanced, as if she already understands that the world listens when you do not raise your voice. She does not know the name Cleopatra, but the shape of her shadow is familiar. You pass another closed door. In a market stall near the temple ruins, a boy carves symbols into dry bark. He does not know their meaning. He learned them from his grandmother, who said they were only for protection. One resembles a serpent, one a moon. He ties them into bracelets and sells them for coin. But sometimes he keeps one for himself, tucked inside his robe, warm against his skin. The silence is heavier now. In a quiet courtyard, a mother hums an old lullaby in a dialect no longer spoken in schools. She doesn't know where she learned it. Her daughter falls asleep to it every night. No one hears the echo of it matching one Cleopatra's nurse once sang. Beneath a sky painted in crushed lapis. Ash drifts in the quiet. Scholars dig along the shore again. Each time the sea recedes, they find more fragments. A tile, a coin, a woman's name scratched hastily into clay. They write papers, measure strata, debate dates. But one of them, young, quiet, left-handed, kneels by a fallen statue and doesn't touch it. She just whispers. No one hears her but the stone, and the stone listens. You almost forget this isn't a memory. But memory has found new mouths, new skin. In a crowded city far from Alexandria, a girl speaks to a mirror, not to admire herself, to practice stillness. She stands with her chin high, eyes level, lips just parted. She does not know why, only that it feels correct. And when she turns away, the candle on her desk flickers, just once. A candle flickers. Your breath slows. And somewhere, beneath sand and ruin and centuries of noise, a queen smiles. Not because she has returned, but because she never left. The silence still hums, but now it hums beneath dunes and dust, beneath shifting horizons where nothing survives unless it learns to move like myth. The desert forgets nothing. It does not write its stories on paper. It whispers them into sand, and the wind carries them, not to preserve, but to plant, to scatter, to hide and then reveal. Ash drifts in the quiet. At dawn, the light stretches long across the dunes, and a single traveler climbs the ridge alone. They wear no crown. Their sandals are worn. Their face is half wrapped against the wind, but their eyes are sharp. They scan the horizon, not for cities, not for treasure, for a feeling, a trace, a reason they do not understand. In the hollow between two ridges, they find a stone, smooth, worn, carved with a figure nearly erased. But if you tilt it just so, beneath the sun, you see her, not her name, her shape. You pass another closed door. Elsewhere, a sandstorm uncovers a fragment of mosaic, a hand holding a scroll. The scroll is broken, but the hand endures. In Cairo, a poet reads aloud from an ancient Egyptian lament translated into modern verse. She walked into silence and left her breath behind. No one says who it's about, but every listener imagines her. Not the queen, not the seductress, just the woman, still standing. The silence is heavier now. At a dig site near Taposiris Magna, archaeologists uncover what may be a tomb, long thought lost. They don't say the name yet. They don't dare. But the lead researcher keeps a lotus in her pocket, and every time she brushes the dirt from stone, she whispers, "Let her choose if she wants to be found." A candle flickers. Your breath slows. You almost forget this isn't a memory, but it is also not fiction. It is something in between, like dust caught in eyelashes, like the memory of a perfume no longer made, like a name mouthed in sleep, because in the desert, even forgotten queens ride the wind. Even ruins rise for a moment. Even the sun pauses, because it remembers her, in the shape of dunes that curl like serpents, in the burn of sand beneath bare feet, in the breathless hush of heat before the monsoon. And somewhere in that heat, she is still walking. The silence still hums, but now it returns to where it began, low and steady, the heartbeat of a torch lit long ago, still burning in the halls of memory. You stand again in the marble corridor. The stars overhead are painted in crushed lapis. The torch flickers against the wall, and above you, the lion's pelt sways, not from wind, not from movement, but from breath. Your breath. She was here. She is here. Not in body, not in bone, in echo, in air. The torch burns lower. You walk the hall slowly. The floor remembers your steps. The columns lean gently, like old trees listening to a child return. Each doorway you pass hums with presence. A cradle, a scroll, a fig left untouched, a carpet once rolled, a child once crowned in silence. The walls don't weep. They remember. You reach the room where it began, where a girl once opened her eyes to gods already watching, where she was named, where she was never allowed to simply be, but always, always became. Queen, mother, myth, flame. You pass another closed door. You kneel, not to her, to the silence that followed her, to the space she carved into time with ink, breath, and bone, to the echo that outlived the empire. You light the final candle. Its glow catches the edge of a mirror turned inward, and in that reflection, you do not see Cleopatra. You see yourself, and you understand that her story was never just hers. It was a map, a warning, a torch, and now it belongs to you. The silence is heavier now. You turn, walk back through the halls, past memory, past myth, and as you do, the torch behind you flickers, but does not die, because you carry it now. Not in your hands, in your breathing, in your listening, in the way you remember. You almost forget this isn't a memory, but it is. And it is also the dream you may return to, whenever the world asks too much, whenever your name feels smaller than your voice, whenever the crown weighs more than the silence. A candle flickers, your breath slows, and the torch stays lit. Even when you close your eyes, you have come far. 40 doors, 40 breaths, 40 nights in the corridors of memory, following the footsteps of a queen who never asked to be remembered, but dared the world to try forgetting her. Now, the torch dims, the marble fades, the voice slows, and you are here, at the edge of the dream, where story becomes stillness. You may open your eyes, if you wish. You may let go of the name, the crown, the fig, the serpent, the sail, or you may hold them longer. Let the hush wrap around you like linen. Let the wind speak for you now. There is no judgment here, no throne waiting, only the breath after silence, the calm after myth. You are not alone. In every ruin, she walks. In every story, she waits. In every shadow, she hums. Let that be enough. Let that be everything. You may return. You may remain. You may dream deeper. The lion's pelt sways. The candle flickers. And the torch, somewhere in the hall behind you, glows soft as breath. End of script. Sweet dreams.